My name is Phyllis. I'm an incest survivor and a survivor of the child care foster system from the 60s and the 70s. From the ages of 2 to the ages of 13, I went through 22 foster homes, 3 orphanages, and a detention home. You say, why did you write a book? I wrote a book because even though all of my family members are in police work, my mother was one of the first female officers in Canada in the 1920s and 30s. At 8 years old, I was eating dog food and fighting the dog for cookies. How does that happen? When I was 2, my mother ended up being diagnosed schizophrenic, and we were apprehended in the middle of the night, taken to a Catholic orphanage system. It is scary. We got in there, and the first thing they said is, do you know that you're going to get your hair washed with this chemical for lice? And I remember my little sister saying, who was around 8 years old, we may be poor, but we don't have lice. The nun said, you'll either get your hair done easily or you'll get it done the hard way. Which would you prefer? The showers were only cold water. My sister said, you can't put Rob in there. He's a boy and he's never seen us naked and you're stripping us down. And the nun said, this is what's going to happen and you're going to do it. And here I was, 2.5. I was so scared. A couple of days later, we were in foster care. I don't remember that one. Second one that I remember, I was about 4.5, 5 years old. And we drove up to the foster home that was out in the country. I get dropped off at the foster home. The lady says to me, you're going to stay here for a little while? I said, where's my brothers and sisters? Don't worry about it. We couldn't all keep you together. And I said, where's my mom? And she looked at me and she said, don't cry. You're here because nobody wants you. If you were wanted, you wouldn't be here. She handed me off to an old man and she said, this is my husband. Stay with him. He's going to look after you. And I walked in the barn and the man grabbed me by the back of my shirt and lifted me up against the barn and said, this is what's going to happen now. You're not going to scream. You're not going to talk. You're not going to say anything. And he proceeded to rape me. I lost my virginity that day. And I remember all I could hear was the pigs. And I thought, this is what foster care means. I was quite a few times in their foster care between the ages of 2 and between the ages of 13. At 9 years old, I remember being in his home and he raped me again several times. This social worker, this blonde social worker from Montreal came to see me. She said to me, I'm just letting you know that you're going to be here for a while. And I said, you can't leave me here for a while. I said, this man's raping me. And she said, no matter where I put you, Phyllis, you're not happy. If I put you here, you're being raped. If I have you at home, you're being raped. And she said, do you realize what time it is? I'm never going to have time to take you to Montreal. I'd have to take you into Montreal for a rape kit and take you back out here. I can't do that. I was 9 years old. I don't understand why you don't understand. I said, please don't tell the foster home what I told you. And of course she did. And of course I got beat. And then when I told my mother, when I was home with my mother just months later, that my brother-in-law was raping me, my mother asked me what I had done at 9 years old. What did you do to turn Dave on? No matter who I talked to, then I'm either to blame or I'm ignored. So I'm not going to say anything anymore. And that's what children do these days. If the first person they speak to doesn't believe them, and the second person they speak to doesn't believe them, they say, why do I say something? When a child who has been abused or had an incest done to them, if they want to talk about it, by God, please let them do it. Let them get it out. Don't tell them. Don't talk. Don't put a muzzle over their mouth. Whether it takes them 5 minutes or 5 hours, let them say what they have to say. Even if the only thing that you can do is say, I love you. Christmas time when I was 12 years old. This is 1974. So I go to bed with my little sister. I get up around 12:30. We're living in a house in the Laurentians. And I go downstairs and my mother, she's got a bottle of liquor and her pills that she had taken. She was near a vent in the floor and I said, Mom, what are you doing? And she said, we're going to be with Jesus for Christmas. And she's going, she was putting lit matches down the furnace to try to get the furnace to explode. I got to get my sister out of here. I went upstairs and I got her dressed, and it was December 24th. The snow was so high. It was about 9 feet high, and I got my sister all dressed in the snowsuit and I put her on the snow and I pushed her. I remember pushing her up the hill to the neighbors where there was a light. And I banged on the door. I said, ouvrez la porte. I said, open your door. They finally opened the door. I said, call an ambulance. My mother needs an ambulance. When the ambulance came, the ambulance driver said to her, he said, this is Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve. I could be with my family right now. This is what I get. So he turned around and he said, say goodbye to your daughter. So I went to go give my mother a hug. And she pushed me across the room. And she said, because of you, we're not with Jesus tonight for his birthday. I said, I'm sorry, Mom. We ended up in the foster care system. 2 weeks later, we were back in my mother's care. Years later, I thought, you tried to kill your kids and nobody pressed charges. You tried to blow up a house. Nobody did anything to these children but put them back into the foster care system. When I was 12 and a half or 13, me and my mom moved to the city, and there I found my saving grace. I met a little boy next door. His name was Richard, and I dated him from my 12 and a half years to 14 and a half. And boy, oh boy, we went everywhere together. However, my sister had now married a pedophile. My sister was approximately 19. I was 8 or 9 when he came into the family. When I was 14, he was raping me in a field. There was a family picnic going on, and I had walked out from the family picnic looking into the river, and he came and raped me by the river. My mother had always taught me I couldn't commit suicide because I was Catholic and I was going to go to hell. And I didn't want to go to hell, but I'm laying in the field and I'm thinking, God, if you really love me, you'll just take me now, because I can't take it anymore. I was going back and forth in foster home, being raped a couple times in the Woods' home, and then by Dave, my brother-in-law, and then by my stepfather. At 13 and a half, I said, it's enough, Lord. I said, you can take me home now. And nothing happened, and I thought, God doesn't even love me. My boyfriend I had at the time, that was my saving grace, that didn't know what was going on. I never told anybody. And I could just say his name and yell his name out, and he'd run out the window down the stairway to meet me. And we always took my little sister everywhere we went, because we knew my mother couldn't care for her. When she started kindergarten at 5 and a half, I had to take her to school every day. I signed out of high school. People don't understand what it's like to live with somebody who's schizophrenic. You walk in the door when you're 5 years old and you say, hello, I'm home. You never know who's going to be there. You never know if it's going to be your mom, or if it's going to be another personality, or it's going to be somebody in a good mood, or somebody in a bad mood. So even at the age of 5, don't have any shadows on the wall. Don't have any knives on the table. Don't have any knives in view. We couldn't have any knives anywhere. She went from being a born-again Christian Catholic woman to this big Christian to the Wicked Witch of the West. My mother was in and out of the Verdun mental institution a minimum 20 times. Every time she tried to kill herself, which was a lot, we would be put into foster care. That's how we ended up in the orphanages a couple of times. If they changed her medication, I came in one day, she was laughing, looking at the wall. I said to my mother, I said, Ma, what are you doing? And she says, I'm watching this program, it's so funny. And she was looking at the wall. There was no TV, no nothing. I know they gave her electric shock in Montreal. Sometimes she said she could fly. Sometimes she was invisible. One time when I was older, and I hate to go back and forth in time, but one time when I was married, and I think my little sister was about 12. My mother came to visit us, and I had my mother for 3 days where her medication seemed to be on keel. Everything was okay. She was the mother of my dreams. Played cards with me, played crib with me, did this with me, did that with me. And on the 4th day, I went to go get her, and she had the blanket up to here, and I said, oh my God. I knew the signs. I said, Ma, why do you have the blanket up to your neck? And I went to pull the blanket down, and I said, you're not dressed. Can you get dressed, please? I'm dressed, and I had to call 911 and get an ambulance to come pick her up, because I knew for whatever reason her medication was off again. My mother had an altar in the room. That's all that was there. A dresser, a white sheet, some candles, picture Mary, and when we were bad, we were brought into that room, we were put on our knees on the wood floor, and we had to pray. I sometimes prayed until my knees bled because I was a bad child. I found God at 19 years old, and that's what saved my sanity. I know if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't even be here. I'd be on the side of the street somewhere just going blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? I know for a fact that he saved my sanity, and I worship him every day, and I thank him every day. But that's what I had to have to be where I am. So I took my son's children. The oldest, when she was 2.5, I took care of her as kinship care. She's now going on 17. The second child is now 10. I got her when she was 20 minutes old, right out of the delivery room. And the third was 3 weeks old. She'd been put in a foster home, and I said, no, I can't, no. I said, hand her over. I'm going to take care of her. They'll drive you to the edge of sanity. They're wonderful children. And I'm glad that I took them. And I hope that kinship care, I hope that if somebody out there is looking to whether or not to do kinship care, that they turn around and say, yes, I'll do it. Keep the children with the families. This is the 17 going on 18. Look at that. Is that not beauty? Eh? Every night I brushed her hair and sang to her and sang her to sleep every night. She knows her Nana. You know, when you live through what I lived through, when you live through that PTSD, you can turn around later in life and say, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Whatever was done to me, boy, this is how I'm going to teach you. This is how I'm going to win. I'm going to win by living my best life. My best life is what I'm going to do. I'm going to forgive you no matter what you've done to me. Because as Oprah says, forgive. As Jesus says, forgive. Right? 777 times. Forgive the same sin. So you forgive. You forgive for yourself, not for others, but you forgive. What did I go through, everything I went through, if I don't live my best life now? If I don't enjoy life now? If I don't love myself now, then what did I go through that for? If I don't tell my story, what did I go through it for? If I don't help somebody else, one other person that's out there that says there's no tomorrow, I'm going to take my life because there's no tomorrow. I can't, like that 14-year-old little girl that was in that field. I want to talk to that 14-year-old little girl and say, it's okay, you don't know what's coming around the corner. And now I have a home that's full of love, full of grandkids, full of noise, full of dogs. There's something wonderful coming around the corner. Just wait a minute, wait a minute. Don't take your life. Wait a minute. You are so worth it. You are so worth it. As much as you think you're unclean, you're clean. As much as you think that you're unworthy, you're worthy.